continuing on. So you pick the text, and first thing you need to do is decide, what does the text mean? In other words, what is the goal of the text? What was the point of the text? So when we look at the Doctor Who episodes, and when I ask you to deconstruct an episode, what I want you to do first is, what is the purpose of the episode? What is it trying to say? What does it mean? Then you're going to start looking at oppositions within the text. So then you'll come up with some binaries within the text. So, for example, in Rose, by the first episode we watched, then what was the meaning of the text? Probably education, setting up educational value to us as a viewer, setting up the characters, giving us some background information on them. We now know afterwards that the Doctor is a time traveler, saves the Earth, etc. So it was informative to give us information about the characters. That may be the meaning. Then we need to come up with some oppositions. So we have humans versus aliens, or humans and aliens. We have the Doctor versus companions. We also have male versus female for just a couple, and there's more that you can come up with. So in one case we can show, or we would need to show, that something understood as normal is really a special case. And so, for example, we would say with Doctor or human versus alien that when we meet the Doctor, first meet the Doctor, we would assume that he's just an Englishman, so that's normal. But it's really that he's not. He's a special case. He's an alien who looks like a human. And so that would be a case where we would show that something's normal, but a special case. We can also show that something understood as primary is dependent on something else. An example of this would be in The Impossible Astronaut and The Day of the Moon. We think that we normally understand that the reason we went to the moon is because the U.S. wanted to win a space race. We wanted to get to the moon before the Soviet Union did. But it was really dependent on, within the context of the episode, the silence pushing us to create a space program because they wanted a spacesuit. So they were manipulating us to get to space for their needs. So it wasn't that we just decided to go to space. It's really dependent on the push, the psychological push, the motivational push by the silence, which gets us to space. Or you could show how two interpretations of the text contradict each other. You could say that, well, if we read it and the meaning is that Rose was set up to introduce us to the characters, but throughout the show they don't provide us much background on the characters. We don't really know much. At the end of it, we don't know all that much about the Doctor. We know that he is the Doctor, he saves the Earth, he gives you like a 30-second blurb of himself, and then he just does things. So although it's set up to introduce us to the characters, because it was the reboot in 2005, it doesn't give us any background to the characters. So that's an internal contradiction. And so when I ask you to deconstruct, I'm really going to ask you honestly to do one of the three things. Although it will help if you go through all three things, but you don't have to. But when I ask for deconstruction, and I will in the lecture question this week, I'll ask you to deconstruct something. Then you can either show how something was a special case, not normal, even though we think it was normal, or you'll show how something is primary, is really dependent on something else, or you'll show that there's two interpretations that contradict one another. I bring that up simply because if you go further in some of the humanities or social sciences in your degree, I can remember having to write, final papers for classes, and in most classes in the French literature program, they were 20, 25 page papers, and we would deconstruct one text. So you'd have to go through all three of those in order to get to the meaning. I'm just going to ask you to go through one in order to do some practice with it.